Okay, so today we're going to start talking about Paperspace and Modelspace in AutoCAD. Now, this is something that I really want to explain to everybody, even those of you who have taken AutoCAD before. I will also mention that it should be warm in here now. we got the heating fixed. We actually have control over it now. Shocking that users would have control, but we do. So if you're cold, we can turn up the heat. So that's a good thing. So we're moving into, in the world of AutoCAD, it's so hard to have a class like this where you get such a short snippet of AutoCAD, and it's really my goal to give you just enough to be able to move on and get by, with the hope that if you really do intend to be in this field, you'll take an AutoCAD class and actually really learn it. That being said, I think one of the things that more often than not fails to be well addressed in the world of AutoCAD in an AutoCAD course or that is this concept of Modelspace and Paperspace. So it's something that I do want to spend time and really hopefully get you to understand, because it's really the most useful thing in terms of setting up your drawings and getting things to work correctly. It takes a little bit of time and it takes a little bit to wrap your brain around it, but we're going to spend the whole day working on it today, and I hope by the end it will make a lot of sense. So thus far in AutoCAD, you've spent the whole time drawing everything to full scale. So if something is 20 feet, it's going to be 20 feet in AutoCAD. And that's one of the beauties of AutoCAD, is that we can draw things accurately at full scale. Now when it comes time to print your drawings, or when it comes time to make a presentation board or something like that, many times we're going to need to scale that from this full scale, full size version into something that can be printed on a piece of paper. And a lot of times there is some kind of an architectural scale that you're going to use. Typically in the world of architecture, you're going to use an 1/8 inch equals a foot, or a 1/4 inch equals a foot, or something like that. That being said, there are obviously a plethora of scales. There's engineering scales, there's architectural scales. You have the ability to choose any of these as your selected choice, but those things are going to happen not as a major scale operation where I say, oh, well, if this wall is 12 feet in reality, let me do the math and scale this whole thing down at a 1/4 inch equals a foot. That means it's going to be 2.5 inches long, right? We don't want to have to do that math in our head. We want the computers to do it for us, and we want to leverage that. So the way that AutoCAD sets this up is it uses something called Modelspace and Paperspace. And thus far, everything we've done is drawn in Modelspace, and Modelspace is full scale. Okay? When we get to Paperspace, and the reason they call it Paperspace is because it's now representative of the sheet of paper that we're going to print on. And those are designated down here at the bottom. There's a little tab that says, this is of course behind my computer, you're never going to be able to see it. It's right down here. It says model on it, and it probably is black in color right now. Okay? And when that model space is clicked, the background of AutoCAD is black. Okay? And that way you know that, yes, you're in model space, you're drawing everything full scale. Right next to that, there's a little button that says Layout 1, probably. I can't guarantee that every one of you will have one that says Layout 1, but in all likelihood you do have one that's called Layout 1. If I click on that Layout 1, I switch to what is called Paperspace. And you can tell this because the little icon changes down here. It's actually an XY triangle with the right angle. That's a holdover from the old school AutoCAD days where Paperspace, you had to really pay attention to this. Now you don't really have to, but it's a white background. That's probably the most relevant thing. The white background represents the sheet of paper that you're going to do your drawing on, right? And so this is no longer full scale. It's actually something different. And so we're going to work in this concept of Paperspace today. And it's important to recognize that you can switch back and forth between Modelspace and Paperspace pretty effortlessly. And so once you have Layout 1 selected, we're going to switch in the drafting and annotation mode, which is the mode we've been in. Usually we've been in this home ribbon dealing with commands. We're going to switch over to layout. Right? It's going to give us a few other options. Right? And the first thing that we're going to click on is the page setup option, which is the second icon over. And when you click the page setup icon, it brings up what's called the page setup manager. And in the page setup manager, it will tell us that our current layout is layout 1. You can think of a layout as a page. Just our current page is page 1, right? They just happen to call it layout 1. And it gives us our page setup options. And so layout 1 is listed here. It's the only layout we have. We're going to work with that. I can choose to create a new, but since I already have one, let's go ahead and just modify it. So I'm going to click on the modify button. And this is going to look an awful lot like the printer icon or the printer dialog box that you've seen already in the world of AutoCAD. But this says page setup layout 1, and this has to do with setting up your page. And so the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to change my printer or plotter. Previously you've been doing publish to web JPEG. We're actually going to go to DWG to PDF, which is the third option from the bottom. And this will be the one that you 99% of the time will use out of AutoCAD because you're ultimately going to be creating a PDF. So we're going to go DWG to PDF. It's actually very rare that in my own personal life and architectural work that I use any of the standard printers. I almost always go to a PDF first. So this is 99% of the time what you're going to have set up. So DWG to PDF, right? I also have the ability to go into the PDF specific properties if I wanted to. Now this starts to get a little bit too technical and we don't need to go into it, but I wanted to point out that it is there as an option should you need it. Okay? So below that we have something called paper size, and this is going to be the size of the paper. Right now we have an ANSI expanded A sheet, which is an 8.5 by 11. Okay? Chances are in the world of architecture, an 8.5 by 11 sheet is rarely going to be sufficient for anything that you're going to be doing. Usually the minimum size is going to be a B size sheet, which is 11 by 17. You're welcome to pick a B size for today. You may find that it won't fit, in which case you can jump up to a C size sheet. Depending on your uses, you could go all the way to a D size sheet. So we're just jumping up in size. I don't care for the scale of what you're doing, whether it ends up being all the way up to a D size sheet. It's really up to you. It doesn't matter to me. I'm going to, because of the size of this, I know that I can fit it on an 11 by 17, but I'd like to give myself a little bit of extra room, so I'm going to do a C size sheet. So it's 22 by 17. And so I'll pick ANSI C 22 by 17, and I can see kind of the layout here that shows me what the page looks like. So it's 22 inches by 17 inches tall. Okay? And you'll notice that the way these page sizes work, right? You have 8.5 by 11, right? Then you jump to, sorry, I'm using my sheets here, right? We have 8.5 by 11. If we combine two 8.5 by 11s, we get 11 by 17, right? If we combine four 8.5 by 11s, sorry, I don't have enough hands to hold this, right? We get a 22 by 17. Does that make sense? Right? That's how these page sizes work. It's just scaled up of an 11 by 17. Anyway, so 22 by 17 is perfectly fine. I have some more options here. Under plot area, I'm going to do the layout because that's obviously, this is the piece of paper that I want to plot. And also here, you'll see plot to scale. And a lot of times people are tempted to mess with this. You don't want to change this. The scale should be 1:1 because this represents the piece of paper that you're printing. So the scale stays exactly the same. Okay? If we come up here to plot style or pen assignments, this has to do with how you're going to plot line weights. I almost always just pick the standard AutoCAD.ctb, which is the standard set of line weights. If you have, let's say you work in an office, a lot of times offices will have setups where line weights are color coded. So if you change certain colors, the plotters will recognize that, oh, a green line is 0.18 and a blue line is this, and they'll color code that way. In which case you'll load a custom CTB file that will interpret those colors into line weights. But right now, all you need is the AutoCAD CTB. Okay. Down here, we have a few other options. Under quality, I usually bump it up to maximum. There's no reason not to. We can always scale it down later, right? And these plot options, the defaults are just fine. We're not really dealing with any rendering, so we don't need to plot transparency. We don't need to worry about it. I do want to plot object line weights. That is checked by default. And I want to plot Paperspace last. And so what that means is if I put text on my Paperspace that isn't in my model, it will always appear on top of anything that's in my model. So if I had dimensions or text or something, it will always be on top. It won't ever be hidden. So that's usually checked by default. And obviously I don't want to hide the Paperspace objects, we want to see them. Okay, and this orientation is landscape. So we've just gone through the page setup options here. Most of the default options are perfectly fine. And when I click OK, you'll see that my page size changes in the background. And so I've edited this, I can go ahead and close this. And so this white page here represents my 22 by 17. Okay? Inside of this 22 by 17, I have the ability to create what are called viewports. And there is one viewport that's listed, that's showing up here by default. And it will always be at least one viewport. I can create more than one viewport down the road if I want. But let's work with this first viewport here. Okay? So if I click on the viewport, I can move it just like any regular object, and it just moves around on the page. Okay? Inside of this viewport, I'm seeing right now the bulk of my drawing. Okay? I'd like, however, to know what the properties of this viewport are. And so I'm going to look at the properties. I'm going to get to the properties window by selecting or by typing properties, which will bring up the properties window here. Sometimes it's already floating on your sidebar here. Sometimes people, and I tend to do this on a large screen, I tend to just dock it to the left so that I know that it's here and I can come back to it, especially when I'm doing layout work, because I'm going to be going back and forth to the properties window here quite a lot. So if I look at this right now, the general information about this viewport I don't really care about, but if I come down here under miscellaneous, right, we can see here that I have a standard scale. Right now it says custom. Okay? If I click where it says custom, you'll see a whole list of scales that I can adjust and set my viewport to. So let's say I go to 1/4 inch equals a foot, okay, and I click on it. Now everything inside of this viewport is scaled at 1/4 inch equals a foot, right, from my original model space drawing. And so I can adjust the size of this viewport to include just my floor plan. Right, and so now I have just my floor plan showing. And if I were to go ahead and print this, right, this would show up with just my floor plan. I'm going to go ahead and print it just so you can see this. Okay, so if I go to plot, right, remember I already set my plotter, so everything's all been set for me. I go ahead and say OK. Let me just put it on the desktop for a second. Okay, now it's going to open, and you see that all of my guidelines and stuff have gone away because I put them specifically on a layer so that they would not be plotted. And all I have is my 1/4 scale drawing here. If I were to measure this drawing, I would find that this length, which is 24 feet, at 1/4 scale would be 6 inches long. Right? And it's already done that scaling for me, which is really nice. Now there's a couple issues in that I have a border around here, and we'll talk about how to get rid of those in a second. But the point being that what I've laid out here is now correct to scale, and when I print the PDF, it's going to show up in the correct scale. Okay? So the fact that the grid shows in the background, the grid will always go away. I could actually turn the grid off. If I jump over into Modelspace, the grid is on. Let me turn the grid off. And I jump back into Paperspace. No, apparently the grid didn't go away. It doesn't really matter. The grid's not going to print. Okay. If we remember back to my layers, right? Remember when I did that guides layer, I checked the option for non-printing. Right. That means that the guides didn't print, so none of the red shows up. That's why in the final print it didn't show up. Okay. So I have this at 1/4 scale equals a foot. Okay. Now one of the challenges with these viewports is I can't actually get inside a viewport and start editing my drawing. So if I double click inside the viewport, I can now be inside and I can start selecting pieces of my drawing and I can start editing. The temptation is to immediately try to zoom in when you're making a correction. Notice, however, that changes the scale inside the viewport. Okay? So to combat that, let me go back. I double click to get out, select my viewport. Now once again I have a custom scale instead of 1/4 inch equals a foot. Let me go back to 1/4 inch equals a foot. There it is. After I've set my scale, I'm going to go up here to display locked, and I'm going to set display locked as yes. And when I do that, it means that even if I go inside my viewport and I try to zoom in, it's not going to zoom in the view. It's not going to change the scale of the viewport. So I'm going to click outside, and you notice that it's changed a little bit. So I can adjust the size of my window here, size of my viewport, to be around my document. Okay, so I have this first viewport set up. I want to show, in addition to this viewport, I want to show my elevation. So let me move this up here in the corner. Okay? And I'd like to show the elevation. Now, could I just extend this down and see the elevation there? Yes. But instead of doing that, I'm actually going to create an entirely separate viewport to show that. So I'm going to go back to the layout, and I'm going to come over here to create a rectangular viewport. Notice that I can create non-rectangular viewports if I wanted to. It's just important to recognize that. But a rectangular viewport is just fine, and I'm going to draw a viewport here on the screen. And you see that I get another version of my drawing. Okay? Once again, this viewport is not set at a particular scale, so I'm going to need to adjust the scale. So I select the viewport, and I'm going to change the standard scale to be 1/4 inch equal to foot. And then in this instance, it's not showing the elevation yet. And notice I do not have the display locked yet. So what I can do very carefully is double click to get inside of this viewport, and then I can use the pan command, which I usually just type pan, but it should be available somewhere, probably under view pan. There we go. You can right click. A lot of times you can hold down the middle mouse button and it'll do it too. And I'm going to pan inside. I'm being careful not to scroll, right? I'm just panning. And then when I'm done, I'll hit escape and then double click outside into my Paperspace world. And now I have just my elevation view in this viewport. So we can tighten this viewport up like so. I can also extend the viewport depending on how much of that side ground plane I want to show. Something like that. And so now I have a viewport, right, that represents my plan and also my elevation. So if I were to print this, right, we'd see my new viewport has the plan and it has the front elevation, right, and that's where I had them laid out on the screen. Okay, so I have the first viewport, and that's great. Now, if you remember correctly, when we drew the side view or my side elevation, right, it's off to one side. So here comes some magic in the world of layouts in AutoCAD. Is I can go ahead and I can create a new. Let me go to layout. I can create a new rectangular viewport. Something like this. It shows my whole drawing. Okay. Let me adjust the scale to 1/4 inch equals a foot. Okay. Let me get inside it and pan. Okay. So this is the side, the elevation that I want to see. Now it's rotated obviously incorrectly. So there's a set of commands that will help you fix it. And I wish that there was some easy, convenient buttons up here that would do it for you. The only way I know how to do it is to actually type it out. And so I have written on your little handout here exactly how to do this. It's step 9. Okay, so you can follow along there. I'm going to use a command that's called mvsetup. Let me get out of this. I'm going to type mvsetup, which stands for I don't know what the M is, but viewport setup. Okay, and I get some options here. I can align, I can create, I can scale. I have options. Right, I'm going to click on align, and I have the ability to rotate view. And so I'll click on rotate view. And it's going to ask me to specify a base point inside the viewport that I want to rotate. And so I'll just click in the center of my building here. Now the important thing here to recognize is that this is an absolute rotation. So it's always going to take if your drawing is set up in Modelspace like this, okay, when I type in this value, right, it's going to start here, and when it rotates, the first rotation is going to be 90, and it's going to rotate to there. The next rotation is going to be 180, The next rotation is going to be 270, and the last rotation doesn't really matter. Okay? So when I type in the value, right, we'll try 90. Sometimes it takes a little experimentation. If I type in 90 and I hit enter, right, we'll see that I've done my setup, but I've gotten the rotation wrong. Right? It rotated to 90, which isn't the way I wanted it. I wanted it to be the opposite way. So this is upside down. So let me go back to mvsetup. Align, rotate, and because this is absolute, instead of typing from where I am, I'm not going to rotate another 90 or a 180. I have to actually type in the other value. So in this case, it's 270 because I wanted it all the way around. So I'll type 270, and I'll have this set up correctly. So if I were to go plot it, and this is one of those things that's a little bit hard to grasp at first. If I were to go plot it, there it is. Right? So I haven't actually rotated it in Modelspace. I've just done this in Paperspace so that I still have the model space where everything's folded out. I've just controlled in the piece of paper how I want to display this. Okay? So I'm going to continue doing that for my other elevations. So let me do a new rectangular viewport. Like this. Let me set my scale. A 1/4 inch equals a foot. Let me go inside and I'm going to pan. This is my rear elevation. I'm going to go to mvsetup. Oops, I have to get out of pan. mvsetup. Align, rotate view. This one's easy, it's 180. There it is. There's the back elevation. And I'll do this whole thing one more time with a rectangular view here. Set my scale. 1/4 inch equals a foot. Let me go ahead and pan. And there's that side. Now this time, I'm going to go to MV Setup, Align, Rotate View, Inside. This one's going to be 90. And I'll hit Enter. And there it is. I've got that last view. Okay, so I now have these set up with my 4 views, and I can choose. At this point, I'll probably lock the viewports, so I'll select them all, right? Come over to Display Locked and say yes, I want them locked. That just means I won't accidentally change the scales. And now I need to do some basic alignments. So let me move these objects around a little bit. Oops, let me move this one. Now I'd like this to line up correctly below it, so let me go ahead and move. I'm going to move from this point right there, so that's going to line up straight down. Notice that these viewports can overlap if they need to. Let me go ahead and line these up as well. So let's take this, and I'm going to move. I want this end to match up with where this end is. This end to also match up there. So those 3 are all aligned. I'm going to move, and I'm going to move all of them such that these 2 ground planes align up. There it is. And now I can make a few adjustments so that those don't overlap if I don't want them to. And the other factor is when I go to plot this right now, and it's always useful to do these test plots along the way to make sure that they're turning out the way you want. Come on. Come on, AutoCAD. So we will wait a little bit. There we go. So let me go ahead and say OK, and I'll save. Yes. There it is. Okay. So I end up with my 3 elevations on the side here. I have my 1 elevation folded down, and I have my floor plan. Maybe I need to move that floor plan down a little bit to make them look right. But the other really ugly thing is I've got all these boxes that are showing up around each of my drawings. I'd really like those to go away. So I'm going to close this, and I'm going to create a new layer. So let me go to Home. I'll go to my layers, and I'm going to create a new layer, and I'm going to call this layer Viewports. And I'll change the color just so that we know everything's on the Viewports layer. We'll change it to green. And I'm going to make the Viewports a non-printing layer. So I'll click on that plotting icon so that I have a little red circle next to it. And let me select all of my viewports. And I'm going to switch to the Viewports layer. Now, this seems a little weird to put them on a non-plotting layer because you think the whole thing wouldn't plot. But that's not the way viewports work. It's just the borders that's not going to plot. So when I go to plot, okay, those borders have all gone away, which is really convenient for me, right? So I have now just a set of drawings. They're all nice and conveniently set to scale, right? Let me move this one down just a little bit. And so, I'm going to go to move, drop this one down. And I can do one more plot. Okay, okay. Yeah, there it is. Okay, so I've gotten rid of those. Everything lines up nicely. I've got my 3 elevations. If I were doing text and or dimensions, right, I would do that in Paperspace here. So I would create a layer. This is not something you have to do. I'm just showing you this for down the road. I would create a layer, and I usually call this Paperspace, right? And we'll leave it black, and it is plotting. Close this. Let me make my active layer Paperspace. And then if I were to label things, let me go zoom in here. For lack of something better, right? And that would show up when I went to plot. Right, see, floor plan shows up. So I can add those kinds of items if I wanted, just like I could add dimensions. We're not going to cover dimensions in this because it's a little bit more of an advanced topic. But if I went to annotate, for example, and I went to dimension, I could dimension from here to here. And I could get whatever the dimension is. Now, the reason that I don't cover dimensions is we have to go in and do the setup to change these from being fractional to being actual feet and inches. So there's still a lot more to it, but at least you would know that you would do that stuff in your Paperspace view. So the focus today is creating a layout that has your plan and your 4 elevations. Hopefully you're doing it on your assignment 105, wherever you are. Take the time today, even if you're not finished with assignment 105, to do your plan and your 4 views, okay, your 4 elevations. Even if you're not completely done with those elevations, if you have just a loose kind of outline of where they would show up, just do it with the loose outline, because changes that I make back in Modelspace, right, let's say, oh, you know, I really wanted a window here, right, and I hadn't drawn it in yet. I wanted that window there. Now when I go back to my Paperspace, lo and behold, there it is. It's shown up, right? So when you make those changes, they automatically populate into your Paperspace, which makes it really, really convenient as you're working through this, okay? So go ahead and set up your layout, get it ready, and then you can keep working on your assignment 105. This is not something that should take you all day. You should have time to work on your 105 at the same time as setting this up, but I want to make sure you all can get this setup done, okay? The last step in part 5, all I'm going to ask you to do is take your PDF, which is right here, open that PDF in Illustrator. So let me go to Start, Programs, Illustrator. It would be faster to just type Illustrator. And we will cover next class on Monday. We will spend a lot more time in Illustrator tweaking settings and making your drawings look really good. Which I'll walk through that whole process on Monday. The idea being that before Monday you have these drawings ready, right? You have your assignment 105s ready, then we'll talk about how to make them look good, and then you'll be able to turn them in. So I'm trying to make it easy for you.
We have till Monday?
You're right. It's Wednesday. Thank you. We do not have school Monday because it's Veterans Day, even though it's not officially Veterans Day because Veterans Day is Tuesday. But for whatever reason, the DVC decided we get Monday off. So anyway, don't come on Monday. Okay? So thank you for reminding me. So on Wednesday, we will do that. When does the sheet say assignment 105 is due? Does anybody have that in front of them? Next Wednesday. Let's make it due the following Monday. Okay? So you guys are all hearing me change that. That way you have time on Wednesday to make sure that it's looking the way you want it to. Okay? So let me go ahead and go to File and then Open. The nice thing about PDFs is they will open natively in Illustrator. So let me come down here. Where is it? All right, there it is. The other really nice thing about these is they're actually all live lines. So I can go in and select the lines and adjust them and tweak them, which is what we're going to talk about. But for today, all you need to do is open it in Illustrator, go to File, Save for Web, and you'll save a JPEG of your drawing. Click Save. This is what you'll post on the course website. Okay? If you post just the PDF, it'll be a link to the PDF. You'll still get credit for it, but I'd like you to try to at least open it in Illustrator. Okay? And whatever it looks like is fine. If it doesn't look great, it's not a problem yet. Okay? Are there any questions about this? No? I tried to spell out everything that I did as carefully as I could on this sheet so that you hopefully won't get lost. Okay, so I'll turn you loose.